It is one of the most famous songs ever written, 8.5 minutes long, full of strange images, packed with references, rumors, theories, and mystery. A song that begins with personal memory, then seems to open out into the story of an entire generation. For more than 50 years, people have argued about what American Pie really means. Is it about Buddy Holly? Is it about the death of rock and roll innocence? Is it about the 1960s? Is it about America losing faith in itself? Or is it about all of those things at once? Don McLean never made it easy. He gave listeners clues. He gave them images. He gave them a song that felt both personal and national. But he never gave them a simple answer. And that is one of the reasons American Pie still fascinates people more than half a century later. This is the story behind American Pie. Don McLean was born in New York in 1945. As a teenager, he loved early rock and roll, and like millions of young people in America, he was deeply affected by the music of Buddy Holly. Buddy Holly was not just another rock and roll star, he was a songwriter, a singer, a guitarist, a band leader, and a pioneer. He helped shape the idea that young musicians could write, perform, and record their own songs. His influence would later be heard in artists far beyond his short lifetime. But on the 3rd of February 1959, everything changed. Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, known as the Big Bopper, died in a plane crash near Clear Lake, Iowa. They had been traveling during the Winter Dance Party tour, a difficult and exhausting run of shows through freezing conditions. Holly chartered a small plane to avoid another long journey on a freezing tour bus. The plane crashed shortly after takeoff. All 3 performers and the pilot were killed. Don McLean was 13 years old when he learned the news. For him, and for many others, it felt like something had ended. Not just the lives of 3 musicians, not just one chapter of early rock and roll, but a sense of innocence. Years later, that tragedy would sit at the emotional center of American Pie. But the song is not only about that one event. If it were only a tribute to Buddy Holly, it would be moving, but much simpler. American Pie became something bigger. It became a journey through memory, music, and cultural change. By the time Don McLean wrote the song, America had been through a turbulent decade. The optimism of the 1950s had faded. The 1960s had brought extraordinary music, but also enormous upheaval. The Kennedy assassination, the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, the assassination of Martin Luther King, the killing of Robert Kennedy, protest, disillusionment. A generation that had once believed music could help change the world was now facing a much darker reality. American Pie captured that feeling, not as a political speech, not as a straightforward history lesson, but as a dreamlike sequence of images. That is part of its power. The song feels like memory, fragmented, emotional, symbolic, sometimes clear, sometimes impossible to pin down. Listeners recognized pieces of it. They heard echoes of artists, events, moments, and cultural shifts. They tried to decode every line. They built theories. They argued about who each character represented. But the song kept resisting complete explanation. That resistance is one of the reasons it endured. Some songs become famous because everyone understands them immediately. American Pie became famous because people could not stop trying to understand it. The length alone made it unusual. At more than 8 minutes, it was far longer than the normal pop single. Radio was not built for songs like that. A track that long was a risk. But American Pie did not feel long in the usual way. It unfolded like a story. Verse by verse, it moved through time, from youthful shock to cultural confusion, from rock and roll innocence to something more complicated. It had the feeling of a campfire song, a folk ballad, and a national elegy all at once. That combination was rare. The song sounded simple enough for people to sing along with, but mysterious enough for people to debate for decades. The recording was also important. American Pie was not produced like a heavy rock epic. It had folk roots, it had acoustic warmth, but it also built steadily. The arrangement allowed the song to grow without losing its storytelling quality. It began intimately, then expanded into something larger. That shape mattered, because the song is not just telling a story. It is taking the listener through a change in emotional scale. At first, it feels personal. A young person remembering a moment of loss. Then it becomes generational, then national. By the end, it feels almost mythic. That is a remarkable achievement, and it explains why the song became more than just a hit. American Pie was released in 1971 and became a #1 hit in the United States in 1972. For a long, cryptic folk rock song, that was extraordinary. It proved that listeners were willing to follow a song that did not behave like a standard single. They did not need everything explained. They were drawn to the mystery, they were drawn to the emotion, they were drawn to the feeling that this song was somehow about them, even if they could not say exactly how. Over time, American Pie became one of the most analyzed songs in popular music. People looked for references to Elvis Presley, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Byrds, the counterculture, Altamont, Woodstock, the loss of idealism, the collapse of the 60s dream. Some interpretations are persuasive, some are speculative, some are probably wrong, but the fact that people kept searching tells us something important. American Pie created a world that listeners wanted to solve. Don McLean has often been careful about giving too much away. That was wise, because if he had explained every reference, the song might have become smaller. Mystery gives it room. Room for listeners, room for memory, room for each generation to find its own meaning. A completely explained American Pie would lose part of its magic. The song works because it feels like a locked room with the door slightly open. You can look inside, you can see shapes, but you never quite see everything. That is why it continues to fascinate people. It is not just nostalgia, it is not just clever writing, it is not just a puzzle. It is a song about what it feels like when a culture changes and nobody is sure what has been lost until it is already gone. That is a feeling people understand. Even if they were not alive in 1959, even if they did not live through the 1960s, every generation experiences moments when the world seems to shift, when something familiar disappears, when the future begins to feel less certain. American Pie gave that feeling a melody. It turned cultural loss into something people could sing. That is why the song's emotional center still matters. Buddy Holly's death was the spark, but the fire spread much wider. The song became a meditation on innocence, memory, and the strange way music becomes tied to who we were at a particular moment in time. When people hear American Pie, they are not only hearing Don McLean's memories, they are often hearing their own. The first time they heard it, the people they knew then, the world they thought they understood, the time before things changed. That is what great songs do. They become personal property, even when they began as someone else's story. American Pie also reminds us that popular music can carry enormous historical weight. A song does not need to be a documentary to document something. It can capture a mood, a fear, a sense of loss, a cultural turning point, and sometimes that is more powerful than a literal account. History tells us what happened, songs tell us how it felt. American Pie does both, but never in a straight line. It circles the truth. It hints at it. It lets the listener fill in the spaces. That is why the song still feels alive. It has never been completely settled. It keeps inviting new interpretations, new arguments, new memories, new listeners. More than 50 years later, people are still asking what American Pie really means. And maybe that is the wrong question. Maybe the better question is why people still need it to mean something. Perhaps because the song understands a feeling that never goes away. The feeling that something beautiful has been lost, that a golden age has ended, that the music has changed, that the world has changed, that we have changed with it. American Pie is not just a song about the past, it is a song about remembering the past from the other side of disappointment. That is why it endures. Not because every mystery has been solved, but because the mystery still feels worth entering. Every great song has a story, and American Pie may have one of the biggest stories of all: a teenage memory, a plane crash, a lost generation, a changing America, and an 8.5-minute song that refused to explain itself completely. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to The Stories Behind the Songs for more music history, classic rock stories, and the moments behind the songs we still love today. Thanks for watching.